Okay, a very good evening to everyone here at William Kentridge's studio in Maboneng, and to our audience who is hopefully joining us soon via live stream from all over the world. I'm Athena Mazarakis. I'm the Momenture of the SO Academy, which is the Academy of the Center for the Less Good Idea. And we're really delighted to welcome you here this evening to this open studio that is hosted by SO. The SO Academy was launched last year in 2020 and is, as I said, the Academy of the Center for the Less Good Idea, and it's based right here in downtown Johannesburg. And it's born out of a desire to expand and extend the learning possibilities that have emerged out of the processes of the Center for the Less Good Idea. So we're in the process of developing a program that captures these and extends them. So it's a program of mentorships, of incubative workshops, and of public conversations. And we hope that you'll continue to engage with us along all of those programs in the coming months. So this evening's open studio is something that's part of and kicks off one of our mentorships, the Thinking in Cardboard Mentorship program, which will be led by Sabine Theunissen, assisted by Marine Fleury, and which is presented in collaboration with UNITA. So this mentorship program involves 6 South African participants and 6 international participants, and they'll be with Sabine and Marine for a period of 6 days in an immersive experience. And it emerges out of a process that Sabine and William have been working on. So this evening, we welcome very warmly Sabine and William. Thank you for allowing us into your process and allowing us a window into this world that you are creating. So it's a huge delight for us and a great privilege to have access to this process. We know also that you've had a very long collaboration of almost 20 years, and so it's wonderful to witness the fruits of that collaboration and how that has shifted and transformed, particularly over the COVID period. And so what you will observe and witness tonight is the process that informs the making of William and Sabine's current collaboration, which is commissioned by the Lucerne Symphony Orchestra, and it is entitled Shostakovich Symphony No. 10. So I hand over to you, William and Sabine, and thank you once again for allowing us in.
Thank you. So to begin with the project, during COVID, during lockdown, all of us had to find projects to do that were of a smaller scale, that didn't involve international travel, that one could do in the studios. And one of the conversations I had in the very early stages of lockdown was a conversation with the costume designer, Greta Goris, who's also run a mentorship program at the Center for the Less Good Idea. And we were talking about Paul Klee, and she was saying she was starting to make small figurines in her studio. And it became a series of puppets that she developed and then developed further with an assistant. And over a period, about 12 or 14 small puppets were designed and made by Greta and her team. Well, through conversations, looking at them on telephones and things like that, and it was a question, what could be done with them? They were very beautiful objects, but we didn't know what on earth they would become. And then I had a phone call from someone saying, would I be interested in making a film to go with a symphony or to go with a performance by a symphony orchestra? And I thought of the puppets and the scale of them, and I thought, well, they could maybe be somehow brought into it. And so that was one route in, starting from something that didn't have a home. The starting point was not saying, what does this symphony need? It started off, what are these strange objects that are being made in Belgium? That's one route. But once we had I had the first thought of, okay, that's the shape, a symphony, that's 50 minutes of music. We know what that length feels like. We've got these strange puppets which give a visual world. Then I thought, well, where are they in? And of course, that means I spoke to Sabine and started working with Sabine. Sabine has been designing the sets for the operas that I've done and theater productions and installations for the last 20 years, as well as designing exhibitions. And all of these projects involve making cardboard models of a manageable size, so we can look at the set, we can look at projections, we can imagine what it would be to go through them. Very often it's done with a cell phone being put inside a model to give you a sense on the screen of the phone of what that could be in a large scale. So essentially what we do, what Sabine and I have been doing, is working with models in the anticipation that these would be blown up into a theater set, or the small image you see would be the size of the museum. But this one I said, what happens if the model is not going to turn into a physical large set, because it's going to end up just as a film, not as a theater production. In which case, instead of saying, well, if we build a miniature theater, that means this is a model for building something that's going to be the size of a large theater. It means this is the final piece. This is the model is the piece, which means that many things were possible. So we then had the form. We had a form which was going to be cardboard models and small-scale puppets at that stage, and we would find a green screen technique, filming things against a wall like this, which you could then extract and subtract. So you had your figures, which you could shrink to put into the model, and then in the projection, enlarge the model to the size of your screen, as large as you liked. So we had a kind of a shape of what it would be, and then the conversation with Sabine is, well, what is the set? What is it? And I'm not sure how we arrived at the idea of an old Soviet museum. But that was the route into the project. I'll just speak for a couple of minutes just to give for those of you who are not familiar with the composer Shostakovich, to understand where that is. Shostakovich was one of the great composers of the last century, writing symphonies, music for films, for ballets, piano music, string quartet music, jazz suites, right from the time of the 1917 Russian Revolution, right up until I think he died in 1970. So over the whole tumultuous period of the revolution. And at first he was one of those who was hugely energized and excited by all the possibilities that this revolution offered, of artistic change, of new forms, of new ways of thinking. But gradually in the Soviet Union, as the 1920s and 30s progressed, it became tighter and tighter, and the demands of a particular kind of music were made. And a lot of musicians and theater people were executed because their music or their theater didn't conform to what the state wanted. It wasn't just that their plays weren't performed, it was that they were taken out and shot. Some of the great directors, some of the great filmmakers, some of the writers. And so this was a fear that Shostakovich lived with for many decades. And this is right from the start of the revolution to after the death of Stalin, the dictator who had run Russia for the last 30 years, in 1953. And the 10th symphony that Shostakovich wrote was first performed in 1953, just a few months after Stalin died. And so we took as our premise, well, this could look back all the way to the beginning of the revolution, up to the 1950s, at all the different characters and events, and put these all, as it were, into a kind of abandoned museum of history. It's a museum which is big enough to have its own small theater. It also has an outside swimming pool that we haven't brought with us here. But any room that we wanted, we could invent, because it was being invented in cardboard and not being invented with real bricks and mortar. So then we had a kind of an idea of, it could be a museum, it could be historical, and it could have a cast of characters, historical characters, all the time knowing that there's an orchestra playing in front. So that is the start. But I want to start then with you, Sabine, about your beginning, your start. What was the first thing you did with the project?
For the project, I think the first thing I did was to look at books and images and these characters, so just to dive in the period, in the imagery. Since I like to cut, I did start cutting. And I did cut a lot of these characters just to...
Just show them.
Yeah, sorry. Just to feel like we are somewhere, someone, somewhere. And from there, we did start.
So people can see you.
I didn't bring these
books. But to explain, so there's a process of immediate research. There's the idea, let's look at different books and find what is the language.
No, but I mean the Leporello
No,
books.
I know.
Yeah.
I know those books.
Yeah.
And so these are simply photostats from different historical books. So I'd had these photos. We'd had lots of photostats and lots of books about Russia, about art in Russia at that period, as to get a kind of a visual raw material. And Sabine's first thing was to say, I want these pages photostated, but not then just to have those pages, but then to literally
to use them.
To spend the time cutting out, which is a slow process in cardboard.
Yeah, but it's a process while you're thinking, and it's a way to emerge in the material. And then we thought, since it was a film set, it was for a film, I thought about movement and about dynamic and transition and rhythm. So I started to cut pages and to do collage in Leporello, like bellow.
So a Leporello would be pages that spread out. So
and
you can bend them like that or that
both
or that.
way. So they were kind of long. And we play with these very organic and unpredictable movement on top of the surface. And we discovered it was giving a variety of possibility. And then what became interesting was this idea of journey and passages leading to another place.
Okay, but before we get there, I want to just emphasize something that you said in passing, which is that this crazy activity, how do you start a project? Well, let's take a random photostat and then spend 2 hours cutting this cardboard without knowing what it's for. Is it going to be used? What its purpose is? But its purpose is, as you said, to let the thinking gel unconsciously while doing it.
Mm-hmm. It's a warm-up.
It's not just a warm-up, it's the material also leading you on. So you do something and you're not sure what's going to, then you look at it and then you say, okay, what does this suggest? Suddenly this is talking to you. It's not you talking to the material. While you taking the photostat, it's you talking to it. Yeah, but as soon as you've cut it, it's outside of you, it's a different thing, and one has to have confidence in what that is going to say to you.
In a way, you create a dialogue with what you're doing. And you're not alone with the material talks to you, and you respond, and then it becomes more and more people around you to telling more and more things, and then it's easier just to follow them.
So one of the first things you did, I think, was some of these arches.
Yeah.
So these were pieces with the sense that we knew we could go through them to start a journey. And at first we would do it simply with a phone. You could take through and see what it looked like. And again, there's a kind of a detail of making. So even though it's not a completely clear idea of how it's going to develop, there's a kind of a dedication to the activity, to the material, and to what is being done.
Again, the idea of the movement and the leading. So it's also very interesting to do a model not just as an object, but as something you will see from one specific point, moving point of view, so the camera, because it is moving and it's leading. So
having done one, then there were another variations on them. So it means that literally Sabine goes through the house and through the art studio looking for things to destroy to find the tassel from the box of chocolates, a box of crayons. This is an old book, the cover of an old book that's been taken.
The speed of doing it tells, it's about material, but it's also about speed of making. I think the rhythm of making leads you and helps you to not think too much, but just follow your hands and follow your energy. So I often say, don't work with something more than 10 meters away from you, because it takes too much time. So the rapidity, the speed of making makes it more efficient and more straight to the point, to see the result and to continue this conversation with what you have in front of you.
I think that, so as soon as Sabine had made these 3 different arches, which have got bits of photostats on them.
In a perspective.
They're slightly different
smaller
scale.
and smaller. Yeah.
So it's fast, but to make those is many days' work. It's not a couple of hours.
It was not many days. It was fast.
It was very fast. It was very fast, but they're very carefully made. They're not just thrown together.
Yeah, but not many days.
Okay. A few days. Some hours. 15 minutes at
Not
least.
15 minutes. No, I think it was a day and a night, maybe.
Yeah. But then it was a question of if you had these here, and we put the camera through it, and we just looked at our phone.
And also the first idea was, maybe we can do it together.
Yes.
The first idea was to have one journey without, we could do 50 minutes in one journey, in one shot. So we started like that.
Wait, I'll just put this on. So you can't quite see it, but to start like that, moving the camera through, like that, and then to continue it, and to keep going until one's arm ran out.
It was a lot of running in the studio.
A lot of running, and to get the difference between the idea of the camera moving through and the actual moving of a phone or a small camera through it so that it's not bouncing and bobbling and the exposure can be right and the focus can be right.
And we were moving a lot of elements in and out. Yeah.
I mean, some things were tiny. Yeah.
Trompe-l'œil.
So this, in fact, was simply one photograph that was cut up a few times and turned into the floor, the ceiling, and the idea you could have a camera here and see the whole scene. And it's very beautiful, but it didn't fit into the museum. So
not yet.
It hasn't yet. So we have a section which we can call the room of failures, of things that we've tried and don't work. And sometimes the room of failures is more interesting than the final project. And sometimes if you try to make the failure, then you really fail, because whatever you're trying to fail at actually looks really nice and interesting.
This was actually interesting because we could use it both ways, meaning you have 2 journeys, but the
so
same
at this
time.
stage we said, okay, we knew we had this old museum which we could put different objects and things in. We had a long vitrine which had natural history objects, glass cases. We made a long floor which you can't really see here, but it's just masking tape covered with shoe polish with glue on top, and it looks like wood grain. So all of these things, the wall here is just sandpaper. The floor of the theatre is a cutting mat. This wooden floor of the theatre is, again, masking tape and shoe polish.
Yeah, sandpaper is a very interesting material for model because it is like stone. It looks very much like stone. So if you want to tell a stone floor, it's a beautiful, and it's so smooth and nice to work with. And if you grain it, if you distress it, it becomes very lively. It's not uniform.
And
this pattern.
so we had the idea of a museum, we had the idea of a model, we knew we had these strange puppets, but then at a certain point we also said, okay, we've also got a symphony, a particular piece of music that's given. How do these things work? So then it would be a question of filming a fragment and listening at random to different parts of the symphony to see, did they work, did it work, what did the speed feel like, were we interested? And then also thinking, well, we can move our camera through the set, but after 5 minutes it's maybe enough, and after 10 minutes maybe a bit long, and after 25 minutes of just showing the set, we're going to run out of things to show. And we need to also get more into the history, the possibilities of what the symphony encompasses. So there's a problem that if you say, okay, I'm going to make a whole story, make a drama, a love story, a murder story, and we do that while you're listening to the symphony, then the symphony becomes like film music, a background. And if, on the other hand, you say, well, we're just going to show for the 50 minutes, for the 50 minutes, we'll just slowly move a camera across this landscape, then it becomes like, videos to put you to sleep, quiet things that don't disturb you. So to find that balance between allowing the music to have its own presence and the film to have its own presence is where we still are. We've done most of the filming of the project, both of the model and of the figures that we'll describe, but how that balance works. One of the things we know, for example, is that, so we've either got a summer walk or we've got a winter walk. So we think, well, for one movement it's quite nice, it's quite light, and another one is quite dark. So we had two different.
These one were used inside the theater.
We can maybe stick it there when we get to the theater.
Yeah.
Well, when we, okay. And then we also discovered, quite interestingly, that if we film material with one kind of music, with a completely different music, not with Shostakovich, with some kwaito, or with some another kind of dance music, or a Baroque piece of music, and then look at that footage that we filmed, listening to the Shostakovich, there are very moments when there's a very surprising coincidence of timing, of impulse, which are often much more interesting than if you're actually moving things in time to the music that you expect them to be used with. Our brains are both very good at making a connection between an image and movement and the thing, so that things which you don't expect to have a connection find a connection. So let's just see, you can see into the kind of theater. So I thought, well, if we need to tell a story, or we want to have not tell a story, but have fragments of history within the film, within the museum, then if we give ourselves a kind of a theater within the museum, then on the stage of the theater can be fragments, can be moments that you see. They don't have to be a whole performance. They're fragments of a performance that you see. And so this is obviously a vital part of the editing, of saying, well, what are we going to put in the theater and how do we put it in the theater? So we've given what Sabine has done to say, here is a possibility. Here is a theater which has these different backgrounds. Here is a curtain which can go up. You can either see the whole theater, or you can put the camera very close and you just see the scenery. And then there's a question of what happens on the stage. So I thought, well, we have our puppets, and do we have some of the, I'll just bring some of the puppets here to show you. Let's do one of, yeah, you bring some, just bring a couple. So, okay. Oh, he's missing a head. Yeah.
This one doesn't have a head.
That one doesn't have a head. That's a complicated one. Okay, let's just take this one. If you hold that. This one's lost its hand also. We only had 2 or 3 hands, so they get moved from puppet to puppet. But they have a sense of what is the movement of a dress that can shift. These two could be in conversation. So they're very abstract. We don't quite know who they are. This one, if you take that. This one is missing its head, but it has a kind of a skirt that can shift and move. And that gave us the idea to say, well, if we're doing historical characters, maybe we can start with these puppets as the basis, and how possible is it to make costumes that have a sense of the language of the puppets? And so that became the next stage of making, and at that stage, we'd had one workshop of filming the model that Sabine had been making some months ago, and a period with the models. And in this last week, we've been going on with making and filming the model, but also working with the characters, the historical characters that are going to be part of the film. Let's put these down. Thanks, Paula. Let's maybe, yep. Which was kind of crazy to say, all right, this is the historical characters we want is Lenin, the father of the Russian Revolution, Trotsky, who was going to take over, but who then gets murdered in 1940, Stalin, who murders Trotsky and takes over from Lenin, so those are the three politicians. And then we have Shostakovich, the composer himself, and a student of his who he may or may not have been the lover of. It's not quite clear, but she was very important in the 10th Symphony. So we have Shostakovich and Elmira Nazarova. And we have the great Russian poet Mayakovsky and Lily Brick. And he was the great poet of the revolution at the start, someone that Shostakovich worked with. But by 1930, he was disillusioned and shot himself. So these were our 7 main characters that we thought we would bring through. And maybe Luke and Andrea, if you come, we should show hello, this is Andrea and Luke, who've been together with other performers, have been here. Let's put you just over here, I think. So we haven't got, over here you can see the costumes that kind of correspond to the puppets, but the faces here, sorry. But what we made were a series of just cardboard photostats, like the set, but of a scale. So you just... Mayakovsky. So if the two of you stand next to each other, come close. Then one starts to get a strange... Hold it right up against you. Yeah, but we could also say, okay, we want to take away Lenin and we want to have a member of the bourgeoisie. So it's a very simple way of arriving at historical characters. They're just, again, photostats that have been painted to make them more intense. And you can see on the floor here, there are 30 or 40 different heads that we have. We can So there's a whole language of how these cardboard heads and figures work, with stillnesses, with movements. Let's give you a different head. Andrea, that's not with Trotsky. And with here, Luke, we'll give you Stalin. So there are all these very complicated cardboard costumes which need people. Okay, but you see behind that what is happening sideways. So it's a kind of a performance that... So there's a great particular skill in making sure that wherever you are, this faces the camera, so that you have, as you turn, it stays with you. So there's a grammar of kind of stillness and movement that has to be learned. So with each thing that one does, whether it's the cardboard model or you can find some other heads there. Just find heads at random or here. There's the material that you've made things with, and then there's the process of learning what the grammar is, in other words, how you have to work with that material. How slow or how fast do you have to move the camera through here? What detail do you need in the model for it to hold you? So you know it's both a model and the world that is being shown in it. How still do the characters have to be when they are performing? And that's a lot of rehearsal and redoing, the same way a lot of filming and refilming to find a rhythm that feels right. So this is Shostakovich, and this was Trotsky again. More pictures of many characters. We thought if it's about the Russian Revolution, we need to have a chorus of the wealthy and a chorus of workers. So we worked yesterday with an Iskatomir choir who were performing all these different characters. But thank you for sharing. Sabine, let's go on with some of the rooms or other thoughts of making.
Yeah, it's very much as William said, that the material leads you. We've met before. We've met before this afternoon, and rather than using a material to translate a thought or something that you know, it's rather look at the material and see what this material could inspire you. What could you do with a sheet of sandpaper if you distress it? Yeah, of course, it looks like stone. But let's do a stone floor. It was not the other way around. It could be tiles. Same here with these cutting mat, for example. And this is, again, about the speed of walking, because all these fragments, they all happen together in the same week. So I have an army of people waiting with the lights and the camera while I'm building. So it's a very, very fast process. So in the middle of the theater, they start filming, and I have no floor. So the cutting mat was there, and I thought, but this is the perfect floor. It's like linoleum or marmoleum for these
So that we see you. Otherwise, we'll just see your back. There we go. There we go. Let's go.
Yeah, but you have to look at the model, not at me. So anyway, so the cutting mat was there. So it became the floor of the theater. And same for the dimension. I take a piece of cardboard, which is on the table, and it gives us the dimension of the theater. So I never measure. It's too slow. So I just compare. And I take reference from the pieces who are on the table. So this is very much what I think is thinking in cardboard, is starting from the material and see what you can develop from the material. And it's not reductive, it's very, it opens window, it adds to the project, it gives freedom to you to go further than where your thoughts could lead you. And it's so, there is joy. It's very joyful, it's very playful. You discover things that you didn't know, like these chairs. William said, no, but we won't spend 1 week to do chairs in the theater. This is an empty theater. So
the chairs, if you look at them, they're in fact, I mean, I don't know how you made it, but there's one photostat which has been cut out of chairs, of a row of chairs.
it's
And
like
then
that,
there's
actually.
another photostat
Yeah,
stuck
it's-
on at the back, more or less the same size.
Yeah.
And then this double sheet of paper is cut out once, which somehow
It's
makes
like a pop-up.
like a pop-up chair.
And then, yes, just cut
And
slots for... And what's nice, that was a discovery for me in this project, which is kind of special because it's just the pleasure of building models for building models, because being a set designer, models are usually used as a reference, as William said before, to make a real set, real scenery. So the product is not the model, the product is the theater piece. So the model is a step, is a reference to build something bigger. Same when you do an exhibition, the model is a tool to think, to design, to place artwork, to create the journey, to choose the color. It's a tool. Here, the model is not a tool. The model is the piece. So the freedom is total, and it's just a playground. And one of the main discoveries for me was the use of the photocopies. First, it was using the photocopies as reference to the Russian and abstract, constructivist architecture, or these kind of posters. And then using the camera, you could really believe. For example, I take this one. From the camera point of view, these images became real. It was astonishing, the realism of these photocopies and the depth it creates through the camera that you cannot see without the camera. So we use these. This one is a bit fragile.
This one,
yeah.
that I'm holding.
Well,
I'm holding it carefully.
Yeah, but...
Oh, the floor, but without it. No, I'll hold it here.
That's fine.
I'm not destroying it. So
okay.
This one, we said, well, what would be the different rooms? We could make many different rooms that you could arrive at. This one is a room of, that's a young Shostakovich in the corner. So we think of this as Shostakovich's room. But if you look at the shape of the whole thing, what in fact it was something lying around my studio. It's an old bread box, the curved wall, the curved edge. And this is something I had in the studio because I thought one day I'll do a film inside a bread box. So we had this wooden bread box lying around, and then Sabine decided it would be used for one of the rooms. So that means that as we progress and we make our characters and we film them, we have to think who will be in here and what will they do.
Mm. So it's a back and forth
You've got
process. Yes, I've got it.
Okay. Maybe we can show the film
yeah.
to show, at this point, I think we'll show the film to show some of the things that we've done. The film, or the elements of it, this is just for us to look at how the camera works, what things we like, to listen to bits of the music. It doesn't yet have any of the actors in it, because this was made some months ago and the actors were here only this week. But I think if we switch off the lights, and I'll pause and we can talk about things as they're there. We've got this in the way, but that's okay. Okay, you can see it clearly enough like that? Would we take... Okay. It's all going to be a bit green, as you can understand. Can we have sound? Is there sound? I don't know.
This is the book.
No, we'll do it like that, we'll talk. So this you can see, this is a camera moving through these corridors.
That was after
and
at the end of the first session.
This beautiful stone floor is, as Sabine said, sandpaper and masking tape.
Masking tape.
It's okay, we can talk rather. So yes, it is a very crude material, but it was very accurately cut, each square. We had a section of the studio which was called the box office, which was Sabine and a couple of people from the studio who would cut precisely. I tried to cut tiles for Sabine, but I was thrown off the job. Too slordig, too messy, not accurate enough. You can see the bench, the support of those bench are just little drawing pins, push pins. Is that okay for you, Chris? Yeah.
We don't have music.
No, but that's all right. You can see the man here is also just a paper cutout. That sort of corkscrew in the middle was a maquette for a sculpture project lying in the studio.
There is a huge transformation given by the light, of course. Yeah, and the wings. So here you see the studio through the...
Yeah, the background of the studio kept showing. We kept trying to block it out, but in fact the camera saw so much more than we expected.
And it tells about the illusion and disillusion.
So we wanted to have it both where you can see it's a model and you feel its scale. So to understand that push and pull. And then the images in it were everything from Russian history, from early revolutionary posters to more social realist images of Lenin and Stalin.
So that was one of the first shots we did as a try, and actually it's going to stay.
Yeah.
It's an unfinished model.
So some places you can see there's just the raw corrugated cardboard. These pieces are all old books of mine that Sabine has gone through the bookshelf and cut up. Some of them are precious books. I was a bit astonished when I saw them on the model, but I was very polite. I'm not sure how we get the music. Oh, so this is the...
These are the books.
Sure. I need to look here. Okay.
Turn it up, Ross.
These are only photocopies on the wall. There is no...
So again, you see
three-dimensional-
photocopies,
Yeah.
tiled floor, piece of cardboard to make the wall. But with the camera at that angle, it becomes a huge room.
With Mayakovsky in the corner.
Make it a bit louder. So you can see this is the room that we just showed you, but Sabine was very dissatisfied with the edges and pieces, so it went through our whole servicing this time round to complete edges, to make stairs up, we changed the lighting.
Before, after, plus the stairs, but
And the light was made higher. Yeah, many things. Okay, we keep going.
the reveal are very important. Yeah, and the foreground.
So we made all these colonnades, which was just corrugated cardboard rolled around
Prits.
around sticks of prit.
Empty. Also interesting to see the shadow, the feet shadow in the picture of you. The feet shadow of you in the picture. Sliding.
You can see, mistake, the floor lifting, the paper of the masking tape. No, the trouble is you do that and then we have to redo the whole thing.
That's the problem.
Sabine, use Prit, stick it. So this is the floor made out of masking tape and shoe polish, the wooden floor. And these are the vitrines which we'll see all the different historical figures in due course. And this isn't actually the model, the puppets that we've been showing you. This was a version of the puppets made maybe 3 centimeters high, made by Diego Sillens from the studio also, to copy the larger puppets.
A model of the model.
So this is our first filming of the theatre, which is not quite right. The lighting isn't enough. So a lot of this last week has been spent refilming the theatre, which we don't have, but it's
This is film with your phone.
yeah.
Shadows.
Here we started adding things in, testing what it's like to add shadows. This was a test that we won't use, but to see how it felt if the set is still. This is one of the puppets, like a museum guard. Again, it's unlikely that it's going to make it into the final film, but it was a test of it.
That's the back of the model.
So this is again an early filming of puppets, and to explain, we film the puppets against a screen like this, a green paper. So they're operated, and then because there isn't the same green in the puppets as on the wall, you can electronically take away the green wall, and then you can put your puppet on any surface. So this was a very early filming of the puppets and trying to put them on the surface, but we discovered they were skating, they were moving, we had to refilm all the puppets to try to get them to perform, but it's a very useful part of the process to see, do we like this? And you can see that's just one of these arches laid on its side.
That's the beginning. So these are all different kinds of tests. I'll zoom through some other things. But here you can see the skating. So we discovered, okay, we have to route our puppets. We can't let them float as much as that.
So this swimming pool, this beautiful old swimming pool, is made with little tiles individually cut out of electrical insulation tape. The same cardboard interior of the theatre is here used for the public swimming pool. And once we had the pool, we thought, well, what actions can happen? Maybe it's where people are executed. Maybe it's a place for a dance. It becomes a space of possibility, which we're still working out what to fill it with. This was an early experiment in a disc which would show the execution of many of Stalin's Politburo members, all his cabinet, most of whom were tried and executed, with turning discs with like a shooting gallery. The edit here we're not yet happy with at all, but we thought, how do we bring the archive material to show the historical world into the project? And so we're looking at different places. Is it inside the theater? Is it in a wall? And this was one attempt.
This is also why we have this kind of details. So there are like hooks to go from the model to the film.
Okay, while it's rolling. This was an early experiment with a puppet. Not a puppet,
No,
this is actually an
you.
actor. It's an actor, so it's a cardboard set which is somewhere here. It's a jacket made out of paper, a big folded leg, which is this one. So that's taking a puppet scale and enlarging it to a full scale. This is the cardboard jacket. And then gloves, and I think for that test I was inside. I was inside. Just hold it here, I think. I'm not sure if it, okay. And here what we did is we stuck different heads on digitally, so his head could turn from side to side. I don't know how to. So again, another use of the photostats where they're not in the set, but they're used as part of the film. So, as you can see here, there's also a whole art within the editing of getting him shadows behind or reflections in the floor, and that's kind of a next stage of how one marries the actor who's been performing here to the cardboard set to make a coherent world. But again, you see just an old book cover used as part of the world there. can see a pair of pliers with a piece of paper stuck on. So these vitrines started out as kind of a museum where you'd have animals stuffed or stones. And then we thought afterwards they're very beautiful, strange prison boxes. So all of our historical characters are also, they're stuck in vitrines. They'll be put inside these vitrines as if they're stuck in their history, unable to escape. That's the next stage of editing that will happen in the next weeks. So all of the stuff here was put with the music. This is just to say, could it work with this kind of music? Not this is the film. This is part of the thinking process, and then we start from the first piece of music and finding the rhythm and the edit. Does it work to put a puppet in the vitrine? They're too busy. We know we need more minimal movement than those. Other views of the theatre. If we try to see what happens if we put Lennon in the theatre. Or in the swimming pool. So we have a series of spaces and we have a series of characters, and then it's a question, what is the combination we make to put those together? Then here, this is just to show you the process. This is a photograph or a clip of the empty swimming pool. Then, or eventually it'll be Trotsky there. You can see what happens with the red flag. We trim his head, I think, should be about that. Below the teeth, give us a bit of space for the flame, it'll still go out. But I'd say try and work with that and see what we get. Okay? And then this is the actor performing in front of the screen here with those marks on his forehead to track so we can put a head of Lennon on top of him. And then that's the subtraction of the green. So it's against in any background we want to put it. And then starting to put it into the swimming pool. So those lines, those fine lines, are tracking the movement. So the computer tracks those X's on his face, so that if you then put another face on, it stays in front of his face as his head moves. These are all things that we also, all of us, or the editing people, the editing team have had to learn for this project. Techniques of following, of tracking, of tracing. So this is the next stage. You see, we're starting to put his shadows in, but we need to put in more of them. Okay, let's put the lights on. That gives you a sense of where we are so far. I think we take questions. Do we go let the discussion? Okay. Oh, I don't know how to stop it.
No, stop you mentioned.
Oh, okay. Okay, I think we're happy to take questions from you, and if any questions come online, we're happy to answer those also. You now know as much about the project as we do. Yes.
How much of this was happening before Sabine arrived, and how much is happening now in person? Because like far away from each other, it must be hard to understand the tactile nature of all of this.
This is the magic of the model. I'm talking in general. We've done projects, William and myself, during pandemic with not meeting once, like exhibition, and we only communicated through the model, with my phone in the model. And we had many meetings, just, move this there, and what if we swap that, and let's go back in the other room. So it's like a very easy virtual reality. And here, what is, for me, very interesting in this project is the fragmentation was given by the circumstances. I think it was not a choice by coincidence. So we've started to work separately. The model, the puppet, the costumes, and then now we are, with the video editing, putting all the things, all the materials and the ingredients together and find a combination. So this fragmentation is a risk, but it's also a very, very, very rich toolbox to play with.
But it's also, I mean, it's also a fragmentation, literally, that each of these are made as different fragments, and we can rearrange them. So we're going to go from the theatre to the arch to the swimming pool.
Very much about combination.
Of combined. But in fact, all of this was made in Johannesburg. Sabine was
it's the third time I'm here.
This is the third time you're here for the model.
Yeah, for the model.
So it is, for this one,
for this
even though you think this one could be made separately from a distance, this has all been made, here physically, which I think was essential for us to,
it was
because
kind of the spine.
It wasn't standing in for something else, it was the piece itself.
And
Andrea,
also
Luke,
the model has these, ability to gather people in a very human and easy way. If you have a discussion on a plan, on a floor plan, on a planning, whatever, people are stressed, they are distracted. Once you bring a model in a room, everybody is focused, interested, and there is something fascinating in the energy coming from a model.
I mean, it's something very childish, and the pleasure of it, of small objects that you move,
it's about
that you
the
can
illusion.
See. Yeah.
It's very much about and the playfulness, exactly. You use a different brain, you're not thinking, you're playing, and then ideas come much, much easier. And it's inviting people.
I'm just wondering what the deadline for the film is in relation to how long it's going to take you to build
all the things.
Yeah, everything.
Well, hopefully the model is done. We have all the elements that we're going to use.
Since 2 hours.
And we've filmed almost all of it. There's a few things we still will film next week. And the acting part is, the characters is finished. So now we have these files and files, digital files of film from all the different elements. And it's now really over to our editors to start constructing. So we have 6 months, 7 months, which is longer than we need. So it should be, it shouldn't be something, oh my God, how do we do this in the time? Unless it doesn't work. It may not work, and well, then it's just not going to work.
And I guess we will still discover that we missed some shoots. And
we'll definitely discover that we miss things, and some will be possible to do, but a lot won't be. So we say, this is the raw material. From this, we must make the symphony. Yeah, a bit like you say, here are all the raw materials in the studio, the cardboard, the sandpaper, the glue, the photostats, make the world from that, and now we have the same thing. Here's your raw material, that's what you've got, make the film from this. And then, I mean, the thing about it is that, firstly, this is shaped and given its form by the symphony, by this 55 minutes of music. But having started on this process, there's a sense for all of us here that, oh, it could go on. Maybe we make a different film that doesn't use Shostakovich, that has other rooms built into it, and we'll continue. That's one new thought from it. There's another new thought. There's a company in America that is doing a platform for digital performances. It's not a computer game, it's not a video game, but it uses a game engine to build a world of. So they've been digitizing parts of our set and some of the puppets and the characters, and then we're going to say, well, if we have this, what performance do we want to happen in that virtual space? So you'll either watch it through a virtual headset, or it will be, you'll watch it on your screen, but can navigate through it the way our phone navigates through. So that's a whole other project which will expand out of this and may be terrible, but it may be very interesting. So there've been people scanning sections of these in great detail and some of the puppets and seeing what they do. So that's another project. Another thing that comes out of it is the thought that, well, with these kinds of puppets that we've made with those flat cardboard heads, they're such an interesting, strange performance. And they're lovely on film, but they're really very beautiful, as you saw, live. To think, well, what is it to do a performance? So now there's a project which was already beginning, which will happen in a year and a half. And all we know is that it starts from this with these cardboard faces. So it may involve these characters, Lenin, Stalin, Mayakovsky, Trotsky, but it may be a whole range of other artists. There's an interesting thing that happens. You know, when one is a character, and then when you're not the character, and there's a different performance, and then at a certain point, to shift in and out. So that will be a live theater piece, which you don't know what it will be, but we know it's something is going to happen. And what we will do tomorrow is all look at our calendars, and with the team that's worked on this, say, well, May next year, June next year, let's put aside 10 days to come back here to Maboneng, to work in the studio on improvising, on testing, looking for texts, seeing what this, how many people do we tested yesterday, we had an Iskatamia choir in here with these masks, putting them on, taking them off. And so they may well become part of a live theater performance. Then we think it's, okay, so it's about Africa, because a lot of the performers, the actors, the singers are from Johannesburg. But is it also about the Soviet Union, about Russia and that revolution? What is that relationship? So do you have people like Patrice Lumumba or Frans Fanon as these faces also, which can shift? It's very interesting. Just Luke and Andrea, if you come again, if you come here. I just want to find them there. Let's find the right faces. I want to find a nice big woman's face. We can try these. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. Where's a nicer woman that we had? Yeah, I'd rather take this one. That one. Okay, so if you're next to each other, facing us here. Okay, but then if what happens is you swap heads. And then, yes. And so to play with genders changing, with what is it to have a black actor with a white face to shift and change, all of these kinds of possibilities that have so many other echoes become something that don't really fit into the symphony, but which are suggested by what the form itself. So, to play with those kinds of questions. So this is so we've got the Shostakovich film, we've got the possibility of another film that's not Shostakovich. We've got this digital imagined construction of this in a 3D set. We've got a live theatrical performance that comes out of it. Are all of the thoughts that happen, and some will become real and some won't become real.
The difficulty will be to blow up the model now.
Yes, that will become the question.
It was easier to shrink the characters.
To shrink the character. So that's a question. Do we maybe get beautiful big paintings the size of some of these images that can be rolled up and down in a theatrical
We need
setting?
to play with the trompe-l'oeil and the illusion.
So that becomes a whole...
Conversation.
It's easy to do it as a big projection, but maybe we want something more material or what the projections are. But that's a conversation we start tomorrow. So we finished filming at 5 o'clock, at 4 o'clock today, so we had an hour to set this up for the meeting. But tomorrow we start both looking at what we shot, but also thinking about what it could be, what it might shift into, what other possibilities there are.
How to transpose.
What would be a story to tell in a theatre production? Is it a kind of ballet? Is it mainly... Yep. Question.
So I think a lot of us are used to a certain kind of green when it comes to green screens. Is there a reason why you guys chose this kind of green? Does it create certain effects that...
So the way a green screen works is that it's about difference. So that if you have a white shirt and the green of a screen, you can tell the computer, look for that color green and make that invisible. If I'm wearing a green costume, more or less the same color, that becomes invisible. If you say, well, let's have a big pink screen at the back, if we have a big pink screen at the back, then we have a problem, or a light brown skin at the back, because then a lot of flesh tone and shadows will match that, and suddenly half your face becomes invisible. So it simply has to do with difference. It's not a particular green. It could have been a blue or a purple, and we wanted something that by itself was also not so horrible to look at. So it became, and in fact, you see, it comes into some of our rooms are the same. So I think if we do a live theatre performance, some of our characters look very beautiful against a very plain. So that could be one of the, not necessarily to even use it as green screen. Yes.
Quite a few questions coming through
Good.
on the live stream, so
let's
if we
do some
go
of
through
those.
some of those. So Beatrice O'Connell asks, did you film everything on a phone, or was it the small camera you used on the tripods? Who is your expert in Premiere Pro?
So our two experts are Janusz Fushi and Jan Omarovic, the two main editors of the project. And it changed. Some of it we started off filming it on a phone, and they're very good. I mean, there are things you can do on a phone you can't do with the most expensive camera in the world. So a $19 app on your phone will give you the possibility to choose your exposure, to put in a stabilizer, to keep your focus on everything. So we started filming on a phone, but now a lot happens on a high-quality miniature camera, like a GoPro that doesn't have, that we can do all the settings of, the lens, the size. So a lot of it would be, the people who've been filming have made a sled out of wood and foam core so that it goes smoothly. And there's a lot of been practicing of how one does that. And then some things of the characters are filmed with a camera like Chris is using here, a regular video camera. And we're still, the whole team is still discovering what things work and what things don't. Thanks.
Right, so, whoops.
It's okay?
So Josie Grindrod asks, please tell us how you make the small puppets in the theatre move, also with green screen?
The small puppets in the... Yes, they don't move in the theatre. They move...
In front of a green
Today
screen.
we were simply operating puppets here, literally in front of us, sitting on a chair with strings, and then they can be shrunk or expanded, the same as the actors.
Question from Dario Doneda. How do you deal with artistic differences in collaboration?
That's a good question. I'll tell you some stories. We did a project 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, called The Head and the Load, which was on an enormously wide stage. We knew we had this very wide stage, and we knew we had to move an orchestra about. And Sabine said, I've designed these beautiful boxes that sort of fold up and the door opens and we could put
like
the
a
orchestra.
crate.
A crate, a big wooden crate.
crate.
Yeah, a trick crate that we could put the orchestra, then doors could open and could put them in, and another one for another scene which could show something else inside. And I hated the idea. I wanted this plain stage with things that move, and I knew Sabine well enough, we'd worked long enough to say, I hate the crates. We must, and Sabine
Empty
knew
stage.
me, and Sabine had enough sense to have as her reply, just to walk away for an hour. And eventually we followed the principle which you always do, is everything has the benefit of the doubt. Even if it sounds like a bad idea, look at it and do it. And of course it was impossible. What was I thinking? How could one do this piece without these beautiful crates that could contain so many worlds? So one of the ways we deal with artistic differences is me understanding to trust the sensibility of the people that I work with. And for all of us, keep an open-ended idea of what will be possible or not. And nothing arrives as if fait accompli is completely finished.
And also be aware about this resistance. There is always a resistance to...
I think I start with no, and then take a while to get to yes.
Yeah, and yesterday with this green screen, this conversation about the green screen was very interesting for me, because everyone said, oh, it's so beautiful in front of the green screen. Everybody likes the green screen, which for me means
no
the
set.
transparency, no set. So I don't even look at it. I know it's there, but I know it will be replaced by my work. So you have to deal with this resistance of bringing your, which is good to have. Otherwise, it's like with no end. No? You could continue.
I mean, there's also
forever.
there's a fifth project which we didn't discuss, which is there's a series of films about what happens in the studio, demonstrating processes and thinking in the studio. And this project, it's many episodes, but this project is one of those episodes. So we're filming, as you saw here, where you see the green screen, where you see the green screen invisible, where you see the puppet in it. And so for that, I also wanted a green that could be looked at. Rather.
It's a beautiful green.
It is. It looks like a lovely 1950s fridge or something like that.
Yeah.
Or a hospital, this kind of green.
We've got a question in Spanish. Sabine, I know you speak and understand Spanish, so I'm going to bring it to you.
Fantástica propuesta y forma de concebir y construir. Gracias por abrir al público. Muchas gracias. También.
Let's just say thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Okay. No question.
Okay, so we have another question from Marlies Grintley. What advice would you give to develop the creative mindset that makes this type of thinking through making to happen?
Well, I think one of the answers is that's what we formed the Center for the Less Good Idea for, to understand the way that thinking can be led by making. Which is not the way that most art schools work, where you write long essays about your idea and the analysis. And here it's saying, let's start with the making and see what it says. And if it's rubbish, then that tells you something about yourself, that your mind is rubbish. And if it's brilliant, that tells you something about yourself, that it makes you vulnerable, because it does reveal, there's an interesting idea, or no, it didn't follow through. But it does, so one needs to have the studio as a safe space for stupidity. And there are a lot of things you do that are really stupid. To say, I'm going to turn sandpaper into stone is a kind of nonsense. Or to think that you can make a character with a piece of cardboard in front of their faces. But you say, let's try it, and maybe it will suggest more things to go on with. So that's an essential part. To not have people watching the whole time everything you're doing, saying, no, that really doesn't work, that's rubbish. Cardboard in front of the head, what are you thinking about? Because that just makes you shrink and not try it. But if you either have an empty studio, so it's you and a camera by yourself, you can play like that, or else you have collaborators, friends, who at the key moment are encouragers rather than critics. You say, yes, go on, let's see what it will become. May not make sense now, but let's see what it can be. That's very important for the energy of work, particularly for younger artists starting. It's so easy to be intimidated by, this is what I've seen in the art magazine, this is what this person's doing, I must do something like that. What will people think if I do this? And so one does have to build a safe, protected environment for the work to happen. And then at a certain point when it's done, yes, you have to be able to say, you've done all this, now it's finally this, and sorry, I don't think it really worked. Or I hated it, or I loved it, all the things which are difficult for artists to hear. We can't escape that, but you can certainly protect yourself from that in the process of making. And I think that's in a way essential.
We had a question on our Instagram live feed which asked, which app do you use on your phone?
It's called Filmic Pro. FILMICPRO, here's an addressment for it. It's a very cheap app, but it gives much more control than any of us could really manage. And if you want to make films on your own just using your phone, it gives you huge control and good quality. Good?
Any other questions from the floor? That's it. We've covered all the online questions.
Sorry.
Yeah. Does it make sense to you in the end? I mean, that's you. Now we have to. Yeah. Pala. No. Okay. Yes, sir.
Okay, I heard you mention an internship for, I heard you mention an internship. So what are the requirements in case maybe someone is interested?
Well, I mean, in a way, the internship mainly happened through the center, where there's a structure for different learning. In the studio myself, there's usually one or two interns at work at the moment. We have a young editor who is an assistant editor, but is learning editing and is working there. So we needed that person in the studio, so some people started as interns and are part of the staff of the studio, like Diego Sillens, who's now very much one of the team of the studio. So there isn't a set rule. It has to do how much space there is at the moment. The studio is full because of all these projects, and it will shrink next year when there aren't as many projects, when these are being finished. So it's not as if I have applications, but the best thing is to keep in touch with what's happening at the center, because that's the best filter through to me and to the studio. And there are also sometimes interns at the center, depending on what's needed or people apply and want to go. So I wish there was a clear answer, but there's not. Yes?
I don't know whether I'm going to be repeating what you said, but you said something about kind of like navigating the whole project digitally. When you were busy explaining the project, I thought to myself, is it possible to kind of like make it an experience? After maybe making the movie, how would it feel for me as an audience to maybe watch the character on the theater, on the stage, and feel like I'm with the character?
That's what this digital project is exactly. It's both about saying, here is a theater. Yes, we can put our digital character, but maybe on this night there's this musician in town, and we film them against the green screen, and then they are performing there. So a live performance to happen, which you click into for that hour in that space. So yes, we're interested in all of those kinds of possible, but it's new. I mean, people of your generation would know much more about that kind of navigation than I do. So for us, we see every new thing, go, wow. And everybody goes, ho-hum. We've seen it a million times. But we know it's not going to be a first-person shooter game. So we have to see what is something that, and I don't know whether that will work or not. We're at early stages.
We had one more question pop
Good,
up
and
on
then
our
we can-
stream. Given the intriguing parallels with stop-motion animation and picture stories in general, is this project by any chance connected to the Fumetto Comics Festival, which also takes place in Lucerne?
It's not, I don't know about that festival, but it's, It's sort of, we'll get this part made. We know there are other thoughts of other projects to make, but other places to show it or what form. Does one make it as a film in itself, and then across the room there's a film of the orchestra playing? Is that a manifestation? Do other orchestras, apart the one in Lucerne, eventually play it also? Yep, Julie.
You've spoken a lot about the possibilities and things that you could make working with the material of cardboard, but I'm interested in the limitations of the material itself. If you faced any challenges in terms of the limitations that it...
Fire.
Yeah, but I mean also it's fragile. So each time we set it up, it has to be serviced. It has to be, things that are glued come loose. It's a mixture of, part of the flexibility is that it's also very delicate. It gets squashed out of shape.
The limitations are part of the possibilities, because you use them, you turn them into something you can use. The corrugation is very flexible in one direction, but very strong if you do a score in the other direction, so you play with that.
Yeah, we say thinking in cardboard, which is specifically what Sabine is working with people doing her
Can I
course.
show you something, William?
Yes. But can we show other people?
We show you seeing what I show you.
Okay, so what Sabine is showing me was something that she made in the last days. I was filming here, and she was working this afternoon. Yeah. And it's a concertina of cardboard on a big circle that's turned. Oh my God. But I'll do it this way so people can... Can we connect this to the projector?
Let's start it. Let's start it. I hope I don't get any personal message.
Okay.
Is it right here?
Okay.
Is this the right? Yeah.
Is that possible? We need to switch out the lights in to look at this. Maybe this will be a good way to end. So this was something done this afternoon. It was corrugated, a concertina of cardboard, turning on a disc with a camera, with Sabine's phone, filming it to give us a different kind of movement in the set.
This is filmed with my phone, it's not with the camera.
Chris, does it work?
Yeah.
So then we need to switch off the light so we can show the projection so people can see it.
Okay, do I
Are you
start
connected
again?
to the projector though? No.
No.
Oh no, that's not going to help.
We can't.
Okay, sorry, no, then keep it shut. This is something people online will see that you won't see. But it's a very beautiful, strange
reveal.
Thank you all very much for being with us, and people further afield for watching. And in a couple of months' time, you'll see whether all the things we're talking about make something that's really interesting or not. And
thank you.
A big thank you to... And I want to say a special thank you to Sabine for agreeing to be a mentor to come and teach at the SO Academy. We hope there'll be a lot of other projects with musicians, with designers, with people who have particular skills and ways of working that could be of interest to. So it's trying to, is there a new way of thinking about learning and teaching at the same time than that in the formal academy?
Sharing.
It's more than sharing. It's like, I don't know quite what it is, but that's the exploration that we're doing with Athena Mazarakis directing it and trying to find what are ways of imparting knowledge, of developing ways of thinking that come out of working with the material, with the body, as thinking, not saying, oh, well, there's thought in the academy, and then there's making somewhere else. Because as we know, there can be many ideas in the academy that are not the best, and there are many things that happen in the practical sphere that are very illuminating about many things in life. So thank you all for being part of this ongoing experiment and discovery of what those might be, to Sabine, to Athena, to Palla, who is the director of the Center for the Less Good Idea, and together with me, the curator of season 7. This is our 7th season at the Center for the Less Good Idea. That should have happened in March last year, and then of course was closed for lockdown and closed later in the year. But the season of performances developed at the center starts next Wednesday and runs till next Saturday. If you look on our website, you'll see the programs. We encourage people further away to watch it on streaming, and those of you around Johannesburg to come to the center to see these performances next week. Thank you. Thank you, dear. Thank you very much.